de guerra. Día B, la historia total. El avance final. El tiempo se agotaba para que los alemanes expulsaran a los aliados hacia el mar. Cada día, británicos, canadienses y estadounidenses fortalecían más sus posiciones en la costa francesa con la llegada de miles de hombres y toneladas de equipo. Pero a pesar de la escasez de combustible y municiones y de constantes ataques de bombarderos enemigos, los soldados alemanes de Normandía no cedían terreno. Quizás en parte gracias a sus armas superiores, pero aún más porque los alemanes veían la batalla de Normandía como su última oportunidad para vencer a los aliados.
We felt we were ready for the invasion. My division was fairly new during Normandy, so some soldiers were still waiting for their equipment. But my reconnaissance regiment was very well equipped. This made us confident that we could defeat the Allies. Also, morale was very high.
We felt really good prepared because we were old hands in the business, and we thought that the Allied troops coming over would be not as old hands as we had been.
Los experimentados soldados alemanes utilizaron el terreno en Normandía como una de sus armas. La trama de pequeños sembradíos separados por cercas de arbustos casi impenetrables, conocidas localmente como bocage, ofrecían al ejército alemán una cantidad ilimitada de posiciones defensivas y hacía casi imposible el avance aliado.
The hedges worked very well for us. We could hide behind them and fire from protected positions, which made it difficult for their infantry, and it stopped their tanks too.
Un corresponsal de guerra alemán se encontraba en la zona para captar el desplazamiento de Helmut Günther y sus hombres en el bocage. Esta mezcla de pantanos, altas cercas, estrechas vías de penetración y colinas llevó al general Omar Bradley a declarar que Normandía era la zona más endemoniada que había visto.
We hit these hedgerows, and a hedgerow is somewhat as high as that ceiling right there, and maybe 6 to 7 feet thick. And every one of the Germans had been there for 4 years, so they could zero in on every blade of grass, and it was suicidal.
The hedgerows themselves were terrible because they were so mysterious to us, and they were, you couldn't escape it. That was the only territory there was, and it felt very dangerous.
Además de la ventaja en el terreno, el ejército alemán también contaba con superioridad en el armamento. El tanque Panzer Mark IV Panther, así como el temible Tiger de 60 toneladas, eran muy efectivos en Normandía. Los acorazados alemanes no solo estaban equipados con mejores armas, sino que su blindaje también era más grueso que el de los débiles Sherman.
We could outrange them easily. We could fire upon them from 1,200 meters, and they could harm us from 400 or 500 meters. So we had a very big gap between our safe distance and their safe distance.
that we had been victims of a tragic misunderstanding, because I had been to tank school. I'd seen the M4 Sherman tank, and I'd been told that that was the best tank going, and I believed it. I believed it better than German tanks. I didn't know that German tanks were like they were. Our men went into Normandy believing that those tanks were good and that they were equal to or better than German tanks. When we got in there, it was a real tragedy to see it was the other way around. Our division had fantastic losses. We lost 87 tanks going the first 7 miles through those hedgerows. It was just horrendous.
Stefan Barilak, de la primera división polaca de blindados, había entrenado en Inglaterra, y cuando su unidad llegó a Normandía, los hombres inventaron un apodo interesante para el tanque estadounidense.
We liked the Sherman because it was fast and very maneuverable, but its armor was too thin. The Sherman was very easily knocked out, so we called it the Rolling Grave.
El tanque alemán que mejor se prestaba para combatir a los Sherman en Normandía era de hecho el anticuado Panzer Mark IV. Aun cuando no era tan avanzado como el Panther o el Tiger, era más maniobrable y tenía una silueta de menor perfil, lo que le permitía esconderse tras los arbustos. Aún así, el poderío de los Tiger superaba cualquiera de sus desventajas. Afortunadamente para los aliados, el ejército alemán no poseía un gran número de blindados pesados modelos Tiger en Normandía.
The Germans had a total of something like 1,550 tanks in the Western theater, most of these, of course, being the Mark IVs and the Panthers. Unfortunately for them, only roughly 100 were actually the heavier German Tiger tanks, which fought so spectacularly during the Normandy campaign, even though they were only committed in small numbers.
Los soldados alemanes más experimentados y con equipo de superior calidad infligían gran número de bajas a las fuerzas aliadas. A menudo eran necesarios 4 o 5 tanques Sherman para vencer a un solo Panther. Parecía que la única forma de vencer a los alemanes en Normandía sería con superioridad numérica. Por ello, los aliados debían asegurar la llegada de suficientes hombres y equipos desde Inglaterra. El eje de esta vital cadena de suministros era una proeza de ingeniería diseñada específicamente para la invasión aliada. El puerto Mulberry
was a floating concrete port system which was to be prefabricated in Britain and towed across the channel and linked together off the beaches so that there would be floating piers big enough for merchant ships, freighters, to unload at into trucks which could then drive ashore.
That Mulberry Harbor must have been, I can't guess now, but it was very long, maybe as much as a mile long, with all these ships sunk outside to make the breakwater. It was just unbelievable, the size of that thing. And it was so nice to land that way instead of having to go off on the beach.
El puerto Mulberry fue todo un éxito. Los suministros llegaban cruzando el canal y el área de almacenamiento de los aliados rápidamente se vio repleta de camiones y tanques. Pero el 19 de junio la situación se deterioró repentinamente. Una fuerte tormenta azotó el Canal de la Mancha. Algunos buques de carga se vieron obligados a dar marcha atrás y muchos otros se hundieron. De hecho, la gran tormenta de junio hundió más naves que los alemanes durante toda la batalla de Normandía. El vendaval de 3 días causó graves daños al puerto británico Mulberry y casi hizo naufragar al puente flotante estadounidense.
The funny thing was that although the British regarded this as a disaster, the Americans, with their tremendous capacity for improvisation, simply ignored the loss of their Mulberry and went on landing supplies straight onto the beaches, just as they'd done on June the 6th. And the Americans landed everything their armies needed straight onto the beach from June the 6th, really right through to the Battle of the Bulge.
Incluso con el suministro aliado severamente restringido, el ejército alemán no fue capaz de reunir un contraataque lo suficientemente grande para expulsar al enemigo de nuevo hacia el mar. La principal razón de este fracaso era la increíble superioridad aérea de la que disfrutaban los aliados.
You could see the losses every day, and you could see that no movement by day on the streets were possible at all. I mean, it's a risk of being shut down after a couple of minutes or half an hour or so. And that made any bigger tactical movements impossible. And I mean, every soldier in Normandy could see that from morning to evening, and only during the night could you do some crawling around.
Ningún bando había sido capaz de lograr una decisión rápida en Normandía. Pero gracias a la superioridad numérica aliada, las fuerzas alemanas comenzaron a darse cuenta de que esta situación de equilibrio era su única meta realista.
There were so many Allied troops, tanks, guns, infantry, air power too, that we realized we only could try to hold our line to make a short step forward, but after the 5th or 6th day from D-Day, we realized we would never see the coast again.
Armas de Guerra continuará en un momento.
Usted está viendo Armas de Guerra con Armas de Guerra.
Armas de Guerra.
A comienzos de junio era evidente que no había esperanzas de que la batalla de Normandía concluyera rápidamente. La escalada de ambos ejércitos tras las respectivas líneas solo apuntaba a una batalla de desgaste al estilo de las libradas en la Primera Guerra Mundial. Los norteamericanos hicieron cierto progreso en el flanco occidental. Habían cortado la península de Cotentin y lograron capturar el puerto de Cherbourg desde el interior, al rendirse el teniente general von Schleven el 26 de junio. Pero el puerto de Cherbourg había sido completamente destruido por los germanos antes de rendirse. Durante al menos un mes más era inservible. La ciudad de Caen parecía ser la clave de la victoria.
Caen is the straight line from Normandy to Paris. Caen sits astride the N13. Caen has the airports outside it that Tedder and the airmen absolutely had to operate inside Normandy. It was the critical point. The push should have been made at Caen. Monty didn't push at Caen.
La confianza y paciencia de Montgomery ante la lentitud del avance aliado daba seguridad a los soldados británicos, pero desesperaba a muchos de los comandantes estadounidenses. Montgomery optó por una solución que parecía extremadamente metódica para algunos, pero de buen juicio para otros, a causa del menor número de bajas que produciría.
The Allied plan was for the British Canadians to fight a heavy battle at their end of the bridgehead, to draw the German reinforcement, particularly the tanks, towards them, while the Americans built up their strength at the western end of the bridgehead, cleared as large a lodgement area, as it was called, as possible, got Cherbourg as a port, and developed a situation in which they would be so much stronger than the Germans opposite them, who would have been weakened by needing to fight the British and Canadians, that they would eventually break out.
Pero las fuerzas estadounidenses aún se encontraban atrapadas en los mortales campos del flanco occidental. A medida que aumentaban sus bajas en los combates a corto alcance, la ruptura de la línea alemana no parecía inminente. Mientras tanto, las fuerzas británicas y canadienses continuaban su asalto sobre Caen, lo suficientemente cerca de las playas de desembarco originales para ser apoyados por fuego de artillería. Varios ataques aliados de gran escala habían logrado que las fuerzas canadienses y británicas se acercaran a la ciudad. Una vez capturados varios de los pueblos cercanos, se requería una ofensiva final para la toma de Cannes. Para asegurar la victoria, se ordenó un bombardeo devastador y controversial sobre la ciudad antes del asalto terrestre durante la noche del 7 de julio.
We felt that the British couldn't get around, and we thought, well, they would simply wipe out what is left of the town. And in fact, one evening, the sky was so full of those planes, it was a sign of power, which was almost exhilarating. And I had a camera, and I decided to take a photograph, but finally gave up. And I thought, well, after all, none of us would survive. It's absolutely stupid or useless to take a photograph.
Una vez saturada la ciudad de Cannes desde el aire, los blindados aliados comenzaron su avance en la segunda fase de la operación Charnwood.
The hole was there, and with that, everything moved. And when I say everything, the whole division moved. Our brigade moved, the brigade on our right moved, the British moved, the division on our left moved, and the next morning we started off sort of sunup, and we were into Caen. I was in the center of Caen with the Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry by high noon.
Pero el bombardeo previo había sido tan devastador que la ciudad se encontraba en ruinas y el desplazamiento era difícil. De hecho, la ciudad no pudo ser reducida durante semanas, pues el bombardeo virtualmente había creado una fortaleza de ruinas para los alemanes.
We learned afterwards there was many civilians that were killed, and not as many Germans as they'd hoped. The Germans, I believe, had retreated a little bit back with the bombing, and as the bombing stopped, they come in and used the ruins as cover, which again held the Canadians up when they attacked.
La ciudad fue destruida de tal forma que incluso los habitantes tenían problemas para desplazarse.
I rushed to my home and could hardly find my way because a church had been bombed flat. The spire used to be a landmark, and I was almost lost because it wasn't there anymore. And it looked more like the surface of the moon than the area near Caen.
Finalmente, a más de un mes del día D, la mayor parte de la ciudad había sido reducida. No había esperanza de una ruptura a gran escala. Pero había ocurrido a costa de una gran pérdida de vidas civiles, por lo que muchos se preguntaban si la toma de Cannes había valido la pena.
God knows how many people were in that rubble. And you'd see the French civilians coming out, women and men and children, with a little cross, and they'd walk way up on the pile, and they'd put a little cross on the pile of dirt and so on, knowing that their mother or father or somebody is in that pile of dirt.
A poor man got trapped in his cellar and was never saved. He died of suffocation, and he kept a diary, and, well, probably very short, but the last sentence he wrote was, I know that I'm dying, and it's a terrible feeling to think that I shall never see the liberation I have been hoping for such a long time, but since I know that because of my death, other people will be liberated, long live France, long live the Allies.
Armas de Guerra continuará en un momento. Armas de Guerra.
Diez días después de la entrada a Cannes, las tropas británicas y canadienses aún trataban de expulsar a los alemanes de este laberinto de escombros. Los estadounidenses se aproximaban al final de la zona de arbustos en el flanco occidental, en dirección a la ciudad de Saint-Lô, pero el avance era lento y muchas las bajas. Con el fin de aliviar la presión sobre los estadounidenses, otro ataque blindado a gran escala fue lanzado por británicos y canadienses. también precedido por bombardeo pesado. Las esperanzas crecían. ¿Daría este ataque la ventaja para el avance?
There was a great big armored battle called Operation Goodwood on July the 18th, which was partly an attempt to have a battle with the German armor, but also an attempt to break out if a breakout was achieved. In fact, it was a German victory. Goodwood saw a terrible loss of British tanks for no major capture of ground.
It was the only time our regiment had to attack going forward. It was a drive by the British from the northeast to southwest, south of Caen. And we came into the side. We pushed them back about 5 to 6 kilometers. And suddenly we thought, oh, it works. We may do it. Then came the fighter bombers, and we were trapped. Then it became dark, and we were all mixed up. Englishmen there, we there, Canadians there. It was a big mixture.
La Operación Goodwood finalmente había logrado reducir la ciudad de Caen, pero no se había inclinado la balanza. También había preocupaciones sobre el uso de bombardeos pesados tan cercanos al frente de batalla. Las bajas por fuego del mismo bando eran un efecto colateral devastador del apoyo aéreo en Normandía.
A member of the 51st Highland Division was attached to the Canadian Army, and they came walking up right directly behind our tanks, and you could see them. They're going up to the front to fight, and there are tears in all their eyes because they probably lost half their buddies. It just makes you feel so bad to see people in that condition and still have to go fight.
Una semana después del fracaso de la Operación Goodwood, los estadounidenses se encontraban listos para intentar una ofensiva por su cuenta. Habían tomado la ciudad de Saint-Lô y finalmente avanzaban sobre campo abierto. Ya no se interponían más obstáculos de arbustos en su camino. El soldado a cargo de la Operación Cobra era el agresivo y confiado George S. Patton, hijo. Siempre dispuesto a tomar riesgos, Patton envió sus blindados puntas de lanza a través de las debilitadas líneas alemanas tan pronto como Bradley le cedió el mando del Tercer Ejército.
Patton was brought into action at the end of July, and Third Army was activated. And it was an ideal situation for Patton. He had an open field in front of him. At one point, Third Army was attacking in all four compass directions at once, with Troy Middleton's corps headed for Brittany and Brest, other corps going towards Falaise, towards Paris, and then straight east towards the German border.
Una vez más, el avance aliado comenzó con apoyo de la omnipresente Fuerza Aérea.
The first flight came and started at 10:30 in the morning, and they came with 900 B-26 bombers. That's a medium bomber. They're flying about 11,000 feet. And these planes could carry 2 or 3 tons of bombs each. Then came in 1,700 B-17s, and that was awesome. I mean, you could just look back and look at the rear, and it's like a big gray snake in the cloud just coming for miles. Just far back you see were planes. And it went on, that attack went on for 3 solid hours. We realized that once the breakthrough started, the armor was going to move, we hoped, very rapidly. And the infantry would not be able to keep up with them. And therefore, the flanks of the armored division were going to be exposed for maybe 3 or 4 hours. And until the infantry could get up and seal off these flanks and consolidate them, they assigned the Air Force a mission to create a bomb line. And any time the Germans tried to cross that bomb line, to attack them.
Los soldados aliados tenían ahora más experiencia en su oficio y combinaban la superioridad aérea, la artillería, los blindados y la infantería con increíble eficiencia durante la Operación Cobra. Los estadounidenses avanzaron más en un día que en las 6 semanas previas.
They moved 900 yards in the first 45 minutes. That's more than they'd been able to move in 2 or 3 days before then. the German reserves that were in that area were completely obliterated. And so in 17 miles, with a heavy air bombardment, we lost 2 tanks. Prior to that, trying to go 8 miles in a hedgerow, we lost 87 tanks.
If we were in equal numbers, or say 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, but that was nearly never the case. So the rest of your cars came around us and knocked us out from the sides.
Hitler ordenó un contraataque el 2 de agosto dirigido a la ciudad de Mortain para cortar la línea de suministros de Patton. Pero las divisiones que Hitler enviaba a la batalla solo tenían una fracción de su antigua fuerza. Además, la inteligencia aliada supo del plan con varias horas de anticipación. La ofensiva ganó cierta cantidad de terreno, pero nunca amenazó seriamente a los aliados. Lo que sí logró fue negar al ejército alemán la oportunidad de una retirada de Normandía. Para algunos de los comandantes aliados, el éxito de la Operación Cobra confirmaba el plan de batalla de Montgomery.
The strategy had worked. The British had got the German armor up to their end of the battlefield, and they had weakened the Germans at the American end of the battlefield sufficiently for the American punch, when it came, to go through the German front and lead to this dramatic breakout led by Patton's Third Army.
Pero para otros en el bando aliado, particularmente los estadounidenses, la ruptura de la línea alemana fue una amarga victoria. Sentían que Montgomery había fracasado en su impulso hacia Cannes después del día D y luego había tenido la audacia de tomar crédito por la victoria.
Now here is where the Americans, of course, got so furious with Montgomery they couldn't stand to be in his presence. He had promised Cannes on D-Day and he didn't get it. Then he promised Cannes an Operation Goodwood early in July, and he didn't get it. Eventually the breakout came, of course, with Bradley on the right flank at Saint-Lô in Operation Cobra. And then Monty had the gall to say, that was always my plan. I had always intended to hold on the left at Cannes and break out with the Americans on the right through Saint-Lô. And you guys just didn't understand my plan because you're not military professionals like I am. Monty's concern was to hold down casualties, which is admirable. On the other hand, from the American point of view, the way you hold down casualties is to win the war quickly. You don't hold down casualties by sitting in a defensive position letting the enemy attack you. You win by bold strokes. And you win quickly, and that way you keep the casualties down. I think Monty is very much at fault for his caution, that he could have had Cannes on day 2 or 3, that the direct road to Paris then would have been open, and the Germans would have had to retreat out of Normandy, and that whole terrible, bloody hedgerow fighting wouldn't have had to happen at all.
Armas de Guerra continuará en un momento.
Usted está viendo Armas de Guerra.
Armas de Guerra.
Los aliados avanzaban, maniobrando para acercar y estrangular al ejército alemán. La batalla se concentraba ahora en unas pocas millas cuadradas de prados y pequeños pueblos en los que los alemanes luchaban por sobrevivir. Miles de ellos se rendían, pero otros miles combatían la enorme superioridad aliada en artillería, ataques aéreos y asaltos de infantería. Ahora que los estadounidenses habían inclinado la balanza y avanzaban a campo abierto, las interrogantes eran cómo y dónde atrapar al ejército alemán en retirada. Una vez más, había ideas muy distintas en el bando aliado.
Patton, with the Germans defeated in Normandy and with the Third Army now on the loose, wanted the big encirclement. He wanted to go way around Paris and really cut off the entire German army in Normandy and end the war. September 1944, the war could have been over. Instead, Monty insisted on the small solution, on the cutting in at the Falaise, and that the Canadians would come down, and that Patton's Third Army and the Canadians would meet at Falaise, and you would trap part of the German army. Monty was the commander. Patton had to do what he was told.
El 8 de agosto, cuando los estadounidenses comenzaron a aproximarse a Falaise desde el norte, el general Bradley afirmó: Esta es una oportunidad que se presenta a un comandante solo una vez en 100 años. Estamos a punto de destruir todo un ejército alemán. La ciudad de Falaise, palabra que significa acantilado en francés, está rodeada por profundas gargantas y estrechos pasajes. Esa fue la ruta que tuvo que tomar el ejército alemán en su retirada de Normandía. Las batallas en las vías cercanas a Falaise fueron unas de las más intensas y brutales de toda la guerra.
Many men were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. We lost nearly all our materials. I was wounded when I came out of the pocket. I got a bomb directly on the backside of my tank. It exploded and I was blown out of the turret.
To use a German soldier slang, we were kleine Marschierer. Men without importance, just crawling around in the dirt of the fighting and the battles.
Even for you people, for you men, to see the content of the pocket of Falaise. So many deaths I've never seen. It's an awful thought even today.
They sent in rocket-flying Typhoons, and the Germans lay in heaps, 10,000 corpses, one on top of the other, and the heat was intense and the smell was absolutely nauseating. A war picture or a war film on television, it may show you some of the visual horrors of the war, but one of the worst horrors of war is the smell.
The psychological effect of being attacked by rockets is very horrendous, and we did as much in that respect, demoralizing the people we were attacking as achieving actual results in knocking a tank out or what have you.
We had artillery pulled by horses that would be down, and the trucks and tanks and half-tracks mixed in there, and they were all destroyed. And what our people were doing, they had bulldozers off to the side of the road where there's trees on the side. They'd be off to the side digging monstrous big long pits. And then they'd come up on the road and just everything went into the pit.
I suppose I suffered a kind of spiritual sickness, all my ideas of humanity and religion and spirituality. I wasn't slow to realize the horror of war, but I hadn't seen it or smelt it face to face.
En Falaise, a medida que se cerraba la brecha para el escape de los alemanes, la superioridad material de los aliados se hizo cada vez más evidente.
You didn't have to be a military genius, you just had to be a normal, average man, and you would know when they started here landing, then they would amass material in such a number that they felt definitely sure to be able to make it. I mean, nobody expected anything else. And we knew from the very beginning, whatever we had there would probably be the last we would have at all, because there was no chance whatsoever to get additional supply, because more or less there was no supply lines left anymore.
Nach den Kämpfen der Normandie,
we felt completely helpless against so many in the Normandy campaign. We wanted to go back to the Eastern Front, where the fighting was man to man and tank versus tank.
Además de su inferioridad numérica, el armamento del ejército alemán era más complejo y por ello menos confiable que el de los aliados.
As you kept moving up and taking ground and seeing a perfectly good Panther, or it looked perfectly good and so on, and sitting in a field or so on, and you wondered whether it had been hit or out of gasoline or a breakdown. That's one thing about the old Sherman, that if you hadn't blown it completely apart, it was a well-made tank, and if tracks or sprockets or things of that were off, or even engines were out and so on, and you could hook on with the tank recovery, you got that thing back and going again in reasonable shape.
We got only 2 tanks during whole invasion until the pocket of Falaise. Only 2 as a supply, and we lost about 110 in the 6 weeks.
Para la Luftwaffe, la superioridad numérica aliada se veía agravada por la falta de pilotos alemanes.
The Luftwaffe never ran out of planes. They were able to get spare aircraft up to the front, but they did run out of pilots. And this was the critical weakness of the Luftwaffe. They never created a pilot training program able to gear up the number of pilots that they would need to carry on this kind of two-front war they got themselves into.
Las fuerzas polacas desempeñaron un papel protagónico en la batalla de Falaise. Habían llegado a Normandía semanas después del día D y estaban ansiosas de vengar sus derrotas ante el ejército alemán en 1939 y 1940.
It was the Poles who, insofar as anyone did nearly close the Falaise pocket, it was the Poles. They got right into the bottleneck and they just sat there. And in order to get out, the Germans had to fight their way past the Poles. A terrible loss to the Poles, they who fought the most gallant fight.
The German soldiers we were facing in Falaise were very scared of us. They were afraid we would take revenge for the terrible things they had done to the Polish people. One German officer said they would never surrender to the Poles. They were much too scared to be taken prisoner by us.
Pero de esta tragedia para el ejército alemán nacieron varios héroes. Fritz Langanke obtuvo la Cruz de Caballería por abrir una ruta de escape que salvó la vida de muchos de sus compatriotas.
Fortunately, we were able to knock off the first 2 American tanks standing there at that road and blocking our advance. Immediately the spirit of all the people was up, you know, and with a big hollering, everybody jumped up, and so we were able, and I had cleared the road for the rest of our 3rd Battalion. I know we were quite a good-sized group with maybe 500-600 German soldiers then breaking through.
There is the sense of disappointment about Falaise in the Allied camp. That we had the Germans in Normandy totally defeated and we should have bagged the lot of them. All sorts of bitterness developed out of the apparent failure at Falaise. Well, there's another way to look at this Falaise battle. It was a tremendous victory. The German army in France was destroyed. A lot of Germans got out, but a lot of Germans didn't get out. About half the German army in France was either killed or captured at Falaise. Those that got out without weapons. Remember, after all, that after Falaise, the Allies, who had been measuring their progress in yards per day for the whole of June and the whole of July, now started measuring their progress in 10 and 20 and 30 and even 50 miles in a day. They leaped across the Seine River. They leaped across the Somme River. They went across these World War I battlefields that men had died in their tens of thousands to capture a square mile of ground. They went past this in a matter of hours and got up to the German border well before the end of September. This was a great victory that was won at Falaise.
Armas de Guerra continuará en un momento.
Usted está viendo Armas de Guerra.
This is what Ernie Pyle wrote on June 12, 1944. I want to tell you what the opening of the Second Front entailed, so that you can know and appreciate, and forever be humbly grateful to those both dead and alive who did it for you.
Durante los últimos 50 años es mucho lo que se ha escrito sobre los eventos del día D y la batalla de Normandía. Pero las únicas palabras que pueden expresar la realidad de esos tiempos de caos son las de los valientes hombres y mujeres que sufrieron el dolor y los sacrificios en esas playas y esos campos.
I hear the word hero all the time, and I know I wasn't a hero because I felt intense fear during the whole operation. That was rather humiliating to know that I could feel fear. I'd never felt fear like that before.
All these guys that gave their lives for their country are heroes. And you can't take that away from them. They're the ones that really made it happen. And of course, the rest of us survived. We helped make it happen, but the point is that we were all on the line, and it could have been any one of us. And we're just one of the lucky ones that got out of it.
It's very sad. I've gone back, and while I stand in the German cemetery in Normandy, I look at their graves, and I read their names. I know these men. We were together. They were only 18 or 19 years old, just boys, and their lives ended. I got to have my life. I've lived a full life, but they didn't. And for what?
And I remember each of them: Private John Supko, PFC Nick Nikelski, Corporal Tom Wolford, Sergeant Julius Hauk, and Lieutenant Freeling Colt are all buried there, and that's years later is when you really feel it and really mourn buddies that died. And Johnny Supko was a little guy and one of the youngest guys in the company, and that's to stand at his grave in Normandy and know that I've lived a full life and had children and grandchildren, and he'll always be a boy who died there. It gets you, really punches you one.
It's a terrible situation, war. It's the most personal, impersonal experience you can ever have. You can be walking across a field, shells come down, everybody hits the ground. You try to claw yourself into the ground, the scream of shells exploding all around you, the stench of cordite. When it's over, you look around, you all right, mate? You all right? Yeah, I'm all right, yeah. Are you all right, mate? You all right? Hey? Young fella, a mate of yours, his sense of humour, maybe his wife photographs, his mum and dad photographs, maybe his kid, his girlfriend. And in that split second of that blinding explosion, all he is now is a face and a memory from the past. And a name. All his ambitions, all his hopes destroyed. The hardest part comes as you're sitting there or standing there looking at him. You think back home, his mum and dad don't know. I do. The hardest part comes when they get that telegram. That's the hardest part for me. That's war. I'm not here to make excuses for war or to justify war, but I definitely am not going to glorify war. War is death, disease, destruction, disablement, and a sheer waste of men and women and raw materials. The only people that profit from war are the men who make the munitions and the guns. Nobody wins wars. There's losers on every side.
When can their glory fade? That's what Tennyson asked about the men of the Light Brigade, and so ask I about the men of D-Day. Tennyson writes, "Oh, the wild charge they made. Honor the charge they made." No way we can ever honor the men of D-Day enough. It is to them that we owe our freedom today.
If you think of all those who made the supreme sacrifice, remember the real meaning of that. They gave away all of their tomorrows for your today. That is the real meaning of the supreme sacrifice made by those people.
El día D fue el comienzo del fin de la guerra en Europa. Jóvenes e inexpertos soldados, frescos tan verdes como maíz creciente antes del 6 de junio, ahora perseguían incansables la tambaleante maquinaria de guerra de Hitler. Los aliados habían liberado a Francia y rápidamente se dirigían a Alemania. La libertad regresaba a Europa gracias a los sacrificios realizados en las playas y los campos de Normandía.